All right, this is your boy D back with another video on You Can Be Free. I got my brother in Christ, EI, with us today. I was just talking to him before we hit record on, I had reached out to him, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe 2021, about sharing his testimony. I heard it in church and it blessed me. So this one I'm excited about because it's been a couple of years since I heard it. So it's kind of going to be like new to me. But for those that will be watching this on YouTube, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit subscribe, like, share with somebody, because I know this video is going to be a blessing to y'all. If you're watching this from Facebook, go to my YouTube channel, and I'm just going to tell y'all, watch to the end. If you hit on this, watch it to the end. So, all right, my brother, I'm just going to throw it to you on whatever you want to share. Just feel led to just flow.
Yes, sir, man. Well, first of all, dog, I greatly appreciate, man, just the honor to be on your pod, man, continue to grind for the kingdom, man, and do all the Lord's leading you to do, bro. So I greatly appreciate it.
Like,
So starting off, man, they call me EI the King. My real name is Stephen Testa. I've done over 12 years in prison. From the age of 18 to 31, I've only been in society 14 months. And I always, lead with that and share that just for the most part, because I know, of course, I'm more than my incarceration. I'm more than what I have went through. But that specifically, the incarceration and the longevity of it, that's what God has chosen. That's what God used in it throughout my life to transform my life and make me who I am today. So long story short, man, this is my background, dog. I grew up as a good kid, man. I really didn't come from like a crazy, chaotic family household, man. I was brought up, man, lower middle class. Mother divorced my father when I was 3, from Houston, Texas, moved us to Florida. And I was just a kid, man, who was raised by his grandmother and his mother. My mom was a hustler, always working to take care of me and my sister. And I was a good kid, man. I really wasn't, wild and crazy. We weren't immersed in like extreme poverty. We're actually from Sarasota County, South Venice, man, V-Town, Laurel Bound. So that's the suburbs, man. So sometimes people hear my testimony and they hear all the time I did in prison and the street lifestyle and all that, and they would, assume that I come from like, a crazy, family background. That's not necessarily true. This lower middle class, man. My mom's a great woman. But as a kid, man, my focus was sports. I've always been a natural born leader on the football field. But I was the shortest kid on every football team, man. The shortest kid in every grade. I hit puberty late. So because of that, man, I had like a short man complex. And because of my father not being like present in my life subconsciously, not realizing it then as a kid, but seeing it now as an adult, looking back, it always made me feel less than, always made me feel worthless, and made me feel like rejected. So I always strive to be like an overachiever, especially like physically. I was always like super aggressive. I was really loud. I've always been like a communicator. So I took out all of that aggression and pain and hurt, and I channeled it on the football field, and it caused me to excel and be, star athlete, captain of the team, captain of the defense, things like that. So those are my younger years, man. They're pretty innocent and harmless. But just throughout my upbringing, man, my preteen years, there's some friends of mine, some best friends, older brothers and cousins. They were caught up in the streets, man, selling dope, thugging, robbing, and just because of their influence and me as a young kid, just looking up to older guys, looking for that fatherhood role model in my life. And of course, plus with hip hop culture and things like that. I remember like one of my homies' older brother, he was a big time dope boy. And he used to come out to the game and, our football games and bet a whole bunch of money, mouthful of gold teeth, whole bunch of chains. And me as a leader, I seen the leadership that he had. And I seen how like everybody followed him and his word was law. So that was really like the beginning of the attraction and the interest for me to the street culture and the street lifestyle. So that continued to progress. Used to fight a lot, and then started smoking weed and drinking at a young age, and that led to me selling weed, cocaine, pills, so on and so forth. And then, man, just my life spiraled out of control. I started really I think just dealing with just a feelings of worthlessness, and looking for fulfillment that I was looking for, like that I felt like I was missing maybe from my father, and not feeling loved and feeling like worthless, like subconsciously, not even realizing it, I began to seek all of the fulfillment I was longing for, not just while in football, but especially in the streets. And that just led me to spiral out of control, man. And I'm getting arrested left and right for fighting, resisting arrest, juvenile probation, in and out of juvenile detention, juvenile programs, all of these things. And of course, football was removed from me because I wasn't eligible. And that just led me to become institutionalized at a young age. So long story short, man, just continue to fast forward at the age of 18 when I was in the county jail. I was going to prison for my first time. I was facing some serious cases. I knew I was facing a lot of time. And I was already, in and out of multiple juvenile programs. I was already sick of living, just a chaotic lifestyle where I'm destroying myself and destroying my life. So while I'm in the county jail, man, there's this older dude, man, from another city, and he's a big town dope boy. Somebody who I would listen to, somebody who like had a name in the street. And, just like every other American, bro, I heard the gospel. I intellectually believed in Jesus. I go to juvenile programs and I go to the Bible studies and I like authentically, listen, I read the Bible. And especially when I was out there in the streets doing wrong, bro, I asked God to forgive me. I knew I was living wrong. I asked God to protect me. God would send like street evangelists to me when I'd be on the corner selling dope, and I respectfully listened. But it was only like in my head, it was never like authentically hit my heart. So I genuinely surrender my life to Jesus. Until this night in the county jail, man, I wasn't friendly. I was a hot-headed jit. But I noticed that he was my cellie. He would never eat his trays. I didn't realize it's because he was fasting. But I used to always see him read his Bible, and he used to like stay to himself. He used to, I see him talking to people. Come to find out later, he'd be ministering to people, but he just stayed in his lane. Long story short, he shared with me his testimony while he was fighting his case. He had a big dope case. He received salvation. He gave his life to Jesus. So a couple of nights in the county jail, he shared with me his testimony, and he had me read in the Gospel in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, that no one can serve two masters. You either love the one and you hate the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So for the first time in my life, man, the veil was removed from my eyes, and I, for the first time, actually like understood the gospel. Like the Spirit of God is convicting my heart. And I saw my sin. I saw that he wasn't my God. My God was money. My God was the world. My God was myself. So for the first time in my life, I genuinely surrendered my life to Jesus that night, and I received salvation. But with that testimony, with the story of my conversion, I always share this. The very following morning in the county jail, I got in a fight. And the reason why I share that is because I believe that fight is like an illustration of how my spiritual growth and process was going to be. So I went to prison, from the county jail. And while I was incarcerated, man, going to prison for the first time at the age of 18, the Lord really just began to deal with me. I just received salvation. I was on fire for God. The Lord began to naturally lead me to share the gospel and minister to other people. And then, especially whenever I went to adult camp towards the end of my bid, just having other mature men of God who were, deeply rooted in the faith, and they just mentor me, disciple me, and God was really just stirring me up. Long story short, man, I get out of prison, and there's still a lot of things within my heart that weren't yet fully healed. And within a short time frame, man, I found myself going right back to the streets, full fledged, spiraling out of control, selling dope, going right back in the same chaos that God delivered me from, and I just crash out. And then God, in His loving hand, chastised me, disciplined me, put me right back on my neck, and I go to prison again, only out for 8 months. Same thing, go to prison the second time. God stirred me up, restore me in His faithfulness, get me on fire, have me focus on Him. God's just building me. Same thing, get out the second time, only out for 6 months, backslide, rebel, run from God's call upon my life. And His love chastised me, put me on my neck. I go to prison for the third time. So by the time I was 23, I was already in prison my third time. And the reason why I say that is because that's a big part of my testimony, man. That was my MO. My MO was rebellion. My MO was inconsistency. I authentically received salvation, that God was transforming my life. But I'd get out and I would just spiral out of control, man. I wasn't plugged in the Christian community. I wasn't being discipled. I wasn't being held accountable. I wasn't walking the call and purpose that God had on my life. Whenever I wrestle with things, rather than confessing and repenting and receiving accountability and encouragement, I just allow the enemy to discourage me. And a lie I used to believe forever. And I used to always say it, man, a tiger will never change his stripes. I used to always believe that lie, man. And I would just spiral out of control and go right back to the streets and end up in prison. But the last prison bid, man, is when the Lord really brought me to a place of full surrender. And it's leading me to a deeper place of intimacy, man, of just passionately and desperately pursuing and chasing after Jesus. But then also, too, one of my closest friends, man, I was blessed with the opportunity to see the Lord transform his life, rise my dog Z Fetty up as a mighty man of God, using him for the kingdom of God. When he was released, when he got out, he backslid and was shot and killed. And it was through his death that God brought forth life in my life. Super upset, not understanding why God would allow that. But it's through his death and me being mad at God and me wrestling with his death and all of these things I was going through during that time. God was using his life and his legacy and even his backsliding and his death as a snapshot for me. Not only that could have been me several times, but God really commissioning me and giving me a vision and giving me a mission to reach the streets with the gospel, because I experienced it firsthand, continuing to destroy my life and everybody who was attached to me because of the street lifestyle, ultimately because of running from God's call upon my life. So throughout that last prison bid, man, it was just a missionary journey. God really began to reveal unto me the call and purpose he placed upon my life as a pastor, teacher, preacher, teacher. Ultimately, man, as a follower and servant unto Christ Jesus and servant unto to my fellow men. But to this to be used by the Lord, man, to plant and pastor 4 different inmate-led churches throughout 4 different prisons throughout the last bid. Man, it was just an amazing experience. Even, of course, obviously, like prison, ain't pretty and it's not easy. My kids growing up the whole time while I've been incarcerated, they're 14 now. So this all the pain that, this comes with being incarcerated. Of course, it wasn't easy, but for the most part, man, like especially that last prison bid, man, God really used that bit to transform my life, and God just really gave me tunnel vision. And even with the things I was still wrestling with there, God really showed me how to be consistent. And whenever I wrestle with things, to still bring them before the Lord and wrestle with, things properly and really stay consistent in community. But ultimately, man, God leading me to walk in my purpose, discipling others. And man, God gave me a crazy, huge vision when I was in prison. Through my dog's death, God was showing me that he was going to use music as a platform to reach the streets with the gospel. I rapped my whole life. It was always just a passion and a hobby. But whenever God began to transform my life, God showed me that gift, like, that's what he does, man. He redeems all of us, not just us, our souls eternally, but he redeems the entirety of our story as well. So we share all the time in the ministry, dog. We used to go wild in the street, throwing our lives away, wilding out. How much more now should we wild out for the kingdom, boldly, courageously, unashamedly? And that's what God did too with the gift of music. He redeemed that to reach the streets with the gospel through music. But God was showing me ultimately that music was just going to be a platform, and the main purpose was ministry. That's what God did, bro, and that's what he's still doing to this day. So I got out a little over 2 years now. October 3rd, 2021 was my release. This is the longest I've been home now since I was 16 years old, man. And God's fulfilling the vision to the T and far beyond in which I could ever even comprehend. My first single got me signed by one of the biggest Christian hip hop labels in the nation by a distribution deal. And God has really used that just to kind of, give me a platform and the opportunity not only to minister through my music, but to ultimately to use music as a tool in which we now travel the nation to proclaim the gospel, bro, and to make disciples in the streets. So the ministry is called Block Hustle, and we're the church in the streets, man. We're super intentional about going throughout the nation and only going to like the most hostile, poverty-stricken communities, to go out there, man, and just to be the church, to be active, to go right back to the block, to go right back to the trap, and to share our stories, man, how God delivered us from that lifestyle. And everybody on the team, mostly all of us, man, then did a whole bunch of time in the chain gang. All of us come from crazy, street lifestyles, whether it be selling dope or robbing or addiction or whatever it may be. God's delivered us out of that lifestyle. And, through faith in Christ, as he's built us up and empowered us by the Spirit of God, he's sending us back to go to that same environment, man, to be a light in darkness. Just to go out there, man, to build authentic, genuine relationships, man. We go out there, we evangelize, we share the gospel, pray for people, pass out a whole bunch of groceries. And of course, man, we use the music at the end of the night, end of the evening as like a big event to not only minister through music and to share our testimony and share our stories, but ultimately, man, to proclaim the gospel and to point the lost to Christ. And not only do we do it in the streets, but especially now as well, too, man, we travel throughout the nation. We go to prisons, county jails, and do the same thing. So yeah, man, it's been amazing. I know that we're only at the beginning. I know God's got so much more in store, and I'm just along for the ride. And most importantly, above everything, man, I just want to continue to genuinely just draw close into a deeper place of intimacy with, and not only God using me to the fullness of everything that He's called me for, but as well the people around me and the people who come from that same lifestyle, man. We want to see them walk in God's given purpose for them as well. That not only they would receive salvation, their life would be transformed, but they too will be empowered to go back to wherever God delivered them from, that they too can share with them how God set them free, that the disciple cycle can continue and the kingdom of God can ultimately be further. So it's my testimony in a nutshell, bro.
That's what I'm talking about. That's a great commission right there. But I want to highlight something you said when you was talking about, I think it was like the second time you had got out.
Yeah.
You said you didn't have accountability, you wasn't being discipled. And I just want people to hear that because like I've been there. I've been locked up a couple of times. I ain't laid down that long though. You know what I mean? But a lot of times when people get in prison or they go to jail, and you can be in a place where you're being still for a while. And so you can come up with plans how you could think that, okay, I'm gonna serve God when I get out, or I'm gonna surrender my life. But a lot of times what I see where a lot of people fail, like where I failed is I'm just thinking I can do it on my own. You know, there's no discipleship, there's no accountability. But at the same time, too, though, like not a lot of churches do it like that for real, for real. So I know how that can be hard for some people to actually go to a church where they can, you know, find that discipleship. But for people that can get that, that's very important. You know what I mean? Because like I said, a lot of times people try to do this on their own. I was just talking to somebody about something that makes me think about, you know, your situation, your story, your testimony. And what we were talking about is having the mind renewed. You know, I just did an interview before yours, and the guy was talking that I had on, he was talking about lust, being renewed in the mind through lust. And when I hear you talk, because you said you've been in prison for so long, it makes me think about how, you know, the children of Israel, when they came out of slavery and they was in the wilderness, they stayed there because they had that mindset. And so one of my biggest challenges after I got saved was the renewal of the mind, because I was still thinking like I did in the world. I was still thinking like the streets. And my mind was messed up. I was kind of sick in the head a little bit just from
Yeah.
things that I've seen. But the thing is this, I haven't, like I said, I haven't laid down as long as you
Mm.
have, you know what I mean? And I haven't went through that. So for people that have been in prison, or maybe they haven't been in prison, but maybe they just been getting away with a lot of stuff and they're dealing with just like trauma. They've seen violence. What has your process been like with the renewal of the mind? Because when I hear you talk, you just shine. I hear God talking through you. I can tell like you just flowing even when you speak. So I know you've been redeemed because I see it on you, but I would have never known that just 2 years ago you got out. How did you get to the point to where you are now as far as having your mind renewed? Because coming from, you know, prison to the world, and even the adjustments of just, you know, church sometimes can be like a business or like it can just be different than, you know, how things are when you are locked up. How's that process been like? How did you go through the renewing of your mind and just adjusting to the world?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, bro. Well, first of all, I would say, man, like we always try to champion when we go back into prisons. The change begins in there. I think sometimes people have a misconception from the outside looking in, not speaking on you because obviously you've been incarcerated, but for people who haven't, they think that, all right, people get locked up and then it's all about whenever they come home. And that's true to a degree, but for the most part, we always champion when we go back in there, like, bro, like, don't forget and don't neglect what God has for you right now while you're incarcerated. And number one, that's ultimately coming to a place of surrender unto the Lord. And like you said, like that growth in ourself, growing into a deeper place of intimacy with Jesus, such as renewing the mind, but as well as serving other people. So for me, and for most people who've been incarcerated and got saved while incarcerated, that process definitely began while I was incarcerated. Just, having my mind renewed, just seeing things from the will of God rather than what the street taught us, or rather than what the laws of the land are. And having a biblical perspective. So definitely beginning in the prison system while I was still incarcerated. But yeah, transitioning home has been crazy. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. First and foremost, man, big shout out to to God, man, and his faithfulness, bro, for keeping me and continuing to sustain me. But it's been beautiful. It's been amazing, but it's also been difficult, bro. It's been crazy.
That's
And I tell people,
that's what I was going
hmm,
to ask you my next question, because you gotta, like, you doing a lot of stuff, you traveling and stuff like that, and
mm,
you doing a lot for the kingdom. But
mm,
I was just about to ask you that those the good parts that people can see. But I
mm,
feel like with me, the reason why I went back a lot is because of the bad times, because of the frustrations that I would have when I'm trying to get a job. I'm not getting a job. I'm trying to get
mm.
some doors open and the doors is not open. So I get frustrated, just go back to what I know and I'll be mad and I didn't have faith. What has you what I know God is keeping you, but what do you use for like motivation and inspiration on the hard days? Like when you just feel like just giving up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, bro. Like I was saying, dog, it's been beautiful, but it's also been crazy. It's been difficult. Like I said, I've been home a little over 2 years now. And I think maybe around that almost pretty much like the 2 year point beginning to feel normal, like being out here. And that's a part of the renewal of the mind that's still going on, dog. Like, a saying we have is, forever convict. And the reason why I say that and we champion that is because ultimately, bro, like the world may label me or label somebody with a past or a record or convicted felon, things like that, that we're scum or we're nobody. But nah, bro, that's what God transformed our life at. I'll never forget that. That's what God used to build me and shape me who I am today, forever convict. But even with that and all those years incarcerated, there's still negative things that, our mind, like you said, has to be renewed and transformed. So it's a process, bro. So maybe about the 2 year mark coming home, I actually began to feel normal about feeling like home again. So yeah, bro, there's been a lot of highs, but there's also been a lot of lows. And I would say for the most part, what keeps me, number one is, man, bro, like accountability. Definitely, I got mature men of God in my life who are in my chest, ask me hard questions. But I also learned throughout my incarceration, the last one, that there's way we can wrestle with sin, right? There's two ways we could wrestle with sin. Number one, we could wrestle in defeat, and that's allowing the enemy to discourage us and make us feel condemned. And like what I used to do, I'd be like, man, a tiger never changes his stripes, and I just run full fledged and rebel against the call of God in my life. That's a negative way to deal with sin. Or the positive side, the correct way is nah, man, I'm gonna keep it a buck. Number one with God, also with me, but also with people around me. And I'm gonna tell on myself, I'm gonna let people hold me accountable. I'm gonna make sure that I do what I need to do to stay right, to stay in the pocket, and that's receiving admonishment, reprovement, rebuke, knowing when to stop, when to slow down, when to sit, when to take a break. But ultimately, bro, like just daily spending time with Jesus. They say enable ship, man, even if it's on like the course is set, it's still the pilot has to check, manually every day to make sure that it's not like the slightest millimeter off or whatever. Because if it's left unchecked over months, the destination is off. And that's the same thing when it comes to our walk with Christ. We got to daily be tapping in, you know what I mean? Drinking from that living water, eating from that living bread, spending time with Jesus so our mind can daily be renewed. We can daily have tunnel vision. But also, too, a big part for me, dog, man, this is bigger than me. And I tell people that all the time. Like, I know God's doing all this in my life, mainly, number one, obviously for his glory, but also, two, God's using me as a template to those who are still incarcerated, men and women, saying, listen, like, yo, I'm doing it in him. Like, God wants to do the same thing in your life and more. So I know there's like too much at stake. This is way bigger than me. And I think just the vision that God's given me from way back when while I was in the chain gang, it's been a fire then and it's still a fire now. And man, I just want to be in the pocket. Doesn't mean I haven't dropped the ball, of course, man. I wrestle with a lot of things. I've already experienced a lot of failures upon release, but for the most part, bro, like, man, there's no option. You just gotta stay faithful and stay consistent, man, and bang out for the king, dog.
Come on now, man. I want y'all to hear him because I haven't heard nobody answer. I don't plan how I'm gonna ask people, but I wasn't planning on you to say that. But this is big for those people that are watching this and they want to be in ministry, whether it's because you want to be a pastor, if you want to be a leader, or if you're a Christian artist like my brother is. He said it's about the people. And like I feel you to the fullest on that because that's the like outside of my love for God, that's what keeps me. You know what I mean? Because I know that it's not about me. Like I know there's another D out there. Like when I do the stuff that I'm doing now, like when I'm helping people that are hurt, that are addicted, you know, I see myself. But ministry got to be about love, because if we try to get out there and do this stuff for any other reason and try to put and bit our own like trying to gain views and likes and stuff like that, you can easily stumble, you can easily fall, because you're making it about yourself. But
Mm.
when you have purpose because of your love for people, that's powerful right there. Something else I
Yeah.
want to ask you, I know when a lot of people have lived a fast lifestyle, they develop a lot of homies in the street that become like brothers. Now,
Mm.
for me, can be around people like that now, because I took a season to where I was walking with God and people know who I am. You know what I mean? But it took years for me to get to a point where I could be an influence versus them being influenced. But for a while, my hardest thing was trying to let old friendships go and stuff like that. What advice for you? But it goes different ways. That's how it was for me. Like, how has it been
Mm.
for you trying to like let go of what was familiar to you when it comes to like old relationships? Or what advice would you have for people that, you know, they don't have to be somebody who's been in jail, but somebody who's trying to walk with Christ, but they hang out with people that do things that would get them in trouble?
Yeah, yeah, of course, man. Well, number one, like that's a variable answer just because it all depends upon who the individual is. And I think for anybody watching this, you have to be mature enough to know like where you're at. Because if you're young in the faith, and that doesn't mean anything negative, like yo, you just like God is beginning to really get you to a place of surrender. That's fire. Praise God for that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But if we're young in the faith, for years while I was in prison, God had like isolated for the most part, like in Christian community to where I was being discipled, I was being mentored, and my majority of my relationships while incarcerated were other believers. God would use me, of course, to do ministry and to evangelize and love on the lost and build people and things like that. But I really couldn't have like consistent daily homies who were still wilding and having like a street lifestyle mindset and gang banged out and all these things. Like, you know, living a crazy life even while incarcerated because I was still young in the faith and I would compromise. I would stumble, I would fall. So my biggest like word of counsel and encouragement for anybody watching this, man, is if you're not like daily consistent, don't get me wrong, we all, no matter how mature we get, man, we all need to take heed lest we fall and don't put ourselves in like situations that can cause us to compromise. But man, if you're like younger in the faith, man, I stay, man, like it's nothing wrong with like, of course, man, always show love to the homies, bro. Like, don't act funny and don't be weird and get saved and then switch up on them. But I mean, but also don't allow like your activity, your engagement with them to where they're causing you to stumble. So if you feel like that could be a situation to where they would cause you to compromise, and you need to set up boundaries and parameters to where they're hanging out with you in your environment and you're setting the tone rather than going to them where they are because you could stumble and fall. But I believe the end goal for all of us is that God builds us up in maturity, and through the Spirit of God, He empowers us to go anywhere. And I believe that's a big misconception within Christian culture, which isn't biblical, that, it's like this undertone of like this little, Christian bubble complex. And, all the believers live a life ever after. And that's it. Nah, bro, like Jesus commanded the apostles and all of us as believers to invade the world, not to be like the world, but to be light in darkness, to be salt in the world. So I believe that's the end goal on the process of spiritual maturity for all of us is wherever God delivers us from, brother, He rises us up, builds us up in maturity, empowered by the Spirit of God to go back. That's what we do, bro. We back at the trap, dog. We back on the block. We back in the midst of the thick of it all. We go to clubs. I perform in clubs. Not saying that to try to like spiritually flex. I'm not recommending that for all believers, but because I know that's my target audience. You know what I mean? And I know that through the Spirit of God and accountability and maturement of God around me, we can go in there, we can move right, and we can evangelize and share the gospel and be a light of Christ in the midst of darkness and do it appropriately and do so wisely. So I would just encourage anybody watching this, man, just know where you're at in your spiritual growth and set up parameters causing you not to fall. But know as well that there's a time and a process as we grow in maturity and with still parameters, that God wants to use us to be an influence of Christ-centered culture no matter where we are.
All right. So I know we showed on time, man. One last thing I want to ask you for people that are watching this for an encouraging word, what can you say? So this is kind of like a two question, you know what I mean? But you can
Mm.
answer it how you want to. What can you say has been one of the most life-changing things that you have learned since you've been in a Christian? And I'm gonna say like in the last 2 years that has like really helped you. And I say that in a way for you to answer, just for encouraging for people that may be watching this that could be
Mm.
dealing with some type of hopelessness because of some stuff that they are going through in their life.
You saying within the past 2 years?
Well, it could be anything. And
Okay.
if I was to answer that question, like there's some things that God has taught me about faith, about how like how you said the Christian life is not always, it's not all good, and it's not about that. It's not about us. I could go deeper in it, but I'm just trying to give you an understanding of like what I'm asking you.
Hmm.
But just something that I'll put it like this. If you even like look at your younger self 10 years ago, something that you could speak to yourself that would have helped you or encouraged you then,
Hmm.
that you know now that you didn't know when you was younger in the faith.
Yeah, man. I would say first, man, like especially upon release, God uses for me as a template my prison experience. God always has me look back to me encountering Jesus while I was incarcerated. Because man, God really had me in the pocket, especially this last bid, you know what I mean, in a place of surrender unto the Lordship of Jesus. So the reason why I say that is because if I could, put in a statement of what did my relationship with Jesus look like while in prison, it would be like, like a desperate pursuit and bold outreach. So God is always like out here, like there's so much stuff going on. There's so many responsibilities. There's so much stuff moving that sometimes I can get caught up in doing and going and going and going and going. I'm on go that sometimes I see myself neglecting the greatest priority of my life. And that's just like not a simple, but like a real, authentic, genuine, desperate pursuit of Jesus. So my biggest encouragement to everybody, man, is like, man, to keep it simple, dog. Like, don't get me wrong, God's got an amazing, huge call on your life, on everybody's life, on my life, man. God creates us as royalty, as kings and queens. And through faith in Jesus, bro, ain't no peons. God has a huge call and assignment specifically for you, for all of us. But it all boils down to this a simplistic response of just desperately pursuing Jesus. And when we enjoy him and like for real, like authentically pursue him and encounter him, and that's our main goal, like everything falls in place, man. We're discerning, we're sensitive to his prompting. He gives us the wisdom how to operate through life and to make decisions. So that'd be my biggest encouragement would be number one. And God is drilling home to me, even now while out, like, keep it simple. And that simple is just a desperate pursuit of Jesus in obedience unto him, holy living. But then also too, number two, I would say, man, like the vision that God's given me while I was in prison, nobody could see it. That's how vision works. You know what I mean? Like he gives like an individual, like sometimes it be collective, this is like a bigger vision, of course. But like, yo, God gave me a vision. He birthed something within me and it became fire. Um, so even here now, while I'm out, um, I have to just trust in radical faith and step out in the unknown and just trust God that he'll fulfill it for his glory and for his kingdom, that people will be empowered. So the reason why I say that is because I just encourage the people who are watching. And if you don't know the vision God's given you, you'll ask. God will show you. God will show you this purpose why he created you and how he wants to use you to further his kingdom. But for those who do know, man, people aren't going to see it, and that's cool. And man, people ain't gonna care. They ain't gonna listen. I tell people all the time, the quicker that we realize and understand that nobody cares about you, your vision, your past, or your story, or what you're gonna do, the 10 steps ahead of the game we are. Because we have to become confident with number one, who God has called us and who he has created, he's called and commissioned us to do. And our motive and intention is number one, for his glory, to be obedient unto him, and it's to do what he said do. And when we keep that simple focus and response, man, we just gotta bang out and he'll do his part. So just I encourage people, man, just to have tunnel vision on that vision that God's given you and know that He'll fulfill it because He's faithful. So I know that was probably a lot,
No,
but
no, that
I'm just
was
over here.
cool,
I'm
man.
over
I
here
don't know
talking,
how old
man.
you are, but you got a lot.
I'm
You got
taking
a
a
lot.
break from working. I'm just over here enjoying talking. My bad, though.
No, man, I could have kept on listening to you. Could have rapped, but I know, like I was saying, I know you don't have that much time. But man, I appreciate the time that you did give us. Every answer was fire. Like I said, I don't know how old you are, but you definitely got a lot of wisdom on you. Uh, Before we end this, can you let people know that may see this, like how they can get in touch with you as far as like your social medias, your YouTube, your anything that you're doing with music, all of that.
Yeah, most definitely, man. As I said, man, they call me EI the King. You can find me on all digital platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever, YouTube, EI the King. I got two podcasts. One is called The Incarceration Podcast. You can look that up on YouTube, The Incarceration Podcast. Fire. All I do is tell prison stories. And I also have another podcast called Let Me Talk, Bro, right here behind me. That's on my EI the King YouTube channel. Yeah, bro, but most importantly, bro, Block Hustle is the ministry. So if y'all want to rock with us, y'all want to come serve, we do a whole bunch of prison stuff, a whole bunch of street outreach. Tap into the website at blockhustle.org.
Hey, do you got so y'all feeding people too, right? So do you got a cash app that you can drop for anybody that may want to sew into that?
Nah. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Okay, okay. All right. So I'm gonna end this video like I always do. Like I said, I want to thank you again for your time, man. I really appreciate you. And for whoever may be dealing with anything, it may not be related to his story, but everybody got a story that you could be dealing with stress, you could be dealing with trauma, you could be dealing with addiction, you could be dealing with lust, pornography, whatever it may be. Just know that you can be free because who the Son has set free is free indeed. We love y'all and we are out.